Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be walking you through a one-step buttonhole on a Brother sewing machine. I am using this machine right here, which is the Brother XL 2600i, and now this is an older Brother machine. It's over 10 years old and it came with a one-step buttonhole. So this is pretty standard on most machines nowadays that are manufactured. A lot of older machines do not have it. They have a 4-step buttonhole or a manual buttonhole, so that'll be different. And this may not be the same exact steps for your machine, but I hope that this video will be helpful for anyone trying to figure out that one-step buttonhole, even if it's a little bit different than how your machine functions, but you might be able to still pick up some tips from this video. So let's go ahead and get started. This only works if your machine is equipped with a one-step buttonhole, but now most days, most machines are. You'll just have to check your manual. If it is, most likely your machine came with a presser fit of some sort that looks something like this. This part goes up and down and this moves back and forth. As you can see, it's very long. This is specific for a Brother one-step, but it should be pretty similar for different types of machines. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get out our fabric, and I'm just going to use a scrap piece of fabric for the ease of this and the ease of handling it. So I have a piece of fabric, I have the button that I'm going to use, and then I have some chalk to mark where my buttonhole is going to go. Now, I will say this is a woven fabric. If you're doing this on your machine with a knit, you are going to want to make sure you have reinforced that with some sort of stabilizer so that it's not going to stretch. A lot of times the one-step buttonholes have issues with knit fabric, but I always like to test it out on the fabric that I am using for my project as well before I go in and sew, because ripping out a buttonhole is not very fun. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to slide up this little notch as far as we can, and we're going to take our button and put it in this little slit and just fold it or slide it down until that button is secure in there. You want it to be nice and tight. You don't want it to be wiggling around. This is going to tell your machine how big of a buttonhole you need. So it's really great. There's no guessing involved in the size of the buttonhole. Then we're just going to set that aside for a second. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to mark on our fabric where our buttonhole is going to go. And what I typically like to do is I like to just mark the top or bottom. You can kind of choose. It also will kind of depend on the guide that you are given if you have one. But you're going to want to mark either the top or bottom. You could do both if you wanted, but one end of your buttonhole and then the line that it's going to follow. So I'm just kind of guessing here on this. The buttonhole probably won't be that long, but now I have kind of a guide. So then once we have that marked, we are going to head over to our sewing machine. So first things first, for your one-step buttonhole, you should have a stitch that looks like some sort of rectangle. Usually it's a number 1 if you have it. And you can see here on my machine, it is a number 1. So I'm going to adjust my machine to a number 1 stitch, which tells my machine I will be stitching a buttonhole. And then what I like to do is I like to lower my stitch length to about 1.5, because this is going to determine how big of a stitch it uses when going up the sides of your buttonhole. So let me see. You can see here, this is one that I did earlier, and it does kind of like a zigzag, and it's going to tell your machine how big you want this stitch length to be. And I typically like my buttonholes to have smaller stitching along there. This was done at about a little under a 2, if that gives you an idea. But so I like to do about pretty close to a 1. Right, and then also at this point, your machine should be threaded just like you normally would use it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our presser foot. If you do not know how to do that, on the back of your presser foot there is a little lever here, and you're just going to press it and it just pops that foot right off. I'm going to set that one aside, and then we're going to grab our buttonhole foot and we are going to set it down on here, and the button goes in the back, so it's going to stick out quite a bit from your machine, and you may have to pull your presser foot up a little bit to get it under there. And then I just put my presser foot down and it clicks right in place, and now I have my buttonhole foot attached. So then the next thing that we're going to do to get our machine ready is, on your machine there is this little lever here. You might have to fight it a little bit to get it down, so you got to pull it down as far as you can. It'll click into place, and then it says push on it, and that's because what you're going to do is you're going to push it back. And so this is what tells your machine when to stop. So your machine will sew, and then this little lever right here that moves your button will push that forward, and it'll tell your machine stop, it's time to go back, and then it'll start moving back. So to get it set up, you're going to push it back as far as you can. It'll just kind of click, and then it should be, you want to make sure it's in between these two tabs. So there's this little tab here, and then the one that moves the lever for your button. So you want to make sure it is in between there and it is pushed back. So now that we have everything on our machine set up and ready to go, we are going to take our fabric and we are going to take our marking line. Now, whether this was the top or bottom, like I said, doesn't really matter, but this horizontal line is going to be the line that we line up under a needle. So you're gonna have to kind of, since this wobbles quite a bit, you might have to hold your presser foot up and kind of adjust it, and you want to get it right under there. Now for mine, my foot doesn't go all the way back by itself just because it's spring loaded, so I always push it back as far as I can. It's about just a little bit before putting my presser foot down, otherwise it doesn't align the edges of my button foot. So if yours isn't all the way back and you can wiggle it a little bit, just go ahead and give it a little bit of a push before putting your presser foot down. And then this is going to sew up the left side of your buttonhole first. So just to give you kind of an idea to align it, so I put it just to the left of that vertical line that I made. And now I am ready to sew. So all you do now is you just kind of guide the fabric gently and push your presser foot. So you can see there, I don't know if you could see it very well, but I hit my point right there. This popped forward, so now it's going to stitch the top and then go all the way back down. And then it'll just keep sewing at the bottom straight across, and you can do it as many times as you want. But then you are done, and you just got to trim your threads off and cut your buttonhole open, and you have the simplest, easiest buttonhole done. So then once you have your buttonhole in, I'll just show you real quick. I like to rip my buttonholes open. I use a seam ripper, and there's other tools you can get in different gadgets, but what I do is I poke it in right at the end on one side, and I go either halfway or as far as I can up the back, and you just rip it through there. And then I do the same thing on the other end. I go in here. You just want to make sure you're not going through your stitches, so that's why you only go halfway. If you go all the way down, there's a good chance that you would go a little too far and run through your stitches, and that causes a really big issue because it's really hard to fix. And then I just cut the middle open, and then you can kind of go in with some snips if you have little straggly strings. But then you can just take your button, you can just put it through there and kind of test out that buttonhole, and it should be a perfect fit. So now that we have learned how to easily complete a buttonhole, I hope that you are no longer afraid of buttonholes and don't dread them. I know a lot of people avoid projects, they avoid adding buttons, they will do snaps instead, and they'll give up some pieces of patterns or just give up a pattern completely because it has buttonholes and they don't want to deal with creating a buttonhole. But if you have a one-step buttonhole or you're looking for a new machine and you don't currently have one, I highly recommend looking for a machine with a one-step buttonhole to make that buttonhole process so much easier. And so like I said, I hope that this video was helpful. Even if you don't have the same machine and the steps aren't completely the same, I do hope that this helped master your buttonholes, and if it did, make sure you let me know. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to help. If you have a different machine or anything like that, you can reach out on Instagram. You can find me at Sewbex, and also make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for future videos. Bye!